The President is the head of state, and the Prime Minister is the head of government. In Sana'a, a supreme political council, not recognized internationally, forms the government. The 1991 Constitution provides that the President be elected by popular vote from at least 2 candidates endorsed by at least 15 members of the Parliament. The Prime Minister, in turn, is appointed by the President and must be approved by 2/3 of the Parliament. The presidential term of office is 7 years, and parliamentary term of elected office is 6 years. Suffrage is universal for people aged 18 and older. Bhutanese Muslims may hold elected office. 242. President Ali Abdullah Saleh became the first elected president in reunified Yemen in 1999, though he had been president of unified Yemen since 1990 and president of North Yemen since 1978. He was re-elected to office in September 2006. Saleh's victory was marked by an election that international observers judged was partly free, though the election was accompanied by violence, violations of press freedoms, and allegations of fraud. 243. Parliamentary elections were held in April 2003, and the General People's Congress maintained an absolute majority. Saleh remained almost uncontested in his seat of power until 2011, when local frustration at his refusal to hold another round of elections, as combined with the impact of the 2011 Arab Spring, resulted in mass protests. 211. In 2012, he was forced to resign from power, though he remained an important factor in Yemeni politics, allying with the Houthis during their takeover in mid-2010s. 244. The Constitution calls for an independent judiciary. The former northern and southern legal codes have been unified. The legal system includes separate commercial courts and a Supreme Court based in Sana'a. Sharia is the main source of laws, with many court cases being debated according to the religious basis of law and many judges being religious scholars as well as legal authorities. The Prison Authority Organization Act, Republican Decree No. 48, 1981, and Prison Act regulations provide the legal framework for management of the country's prison system. 245. Foreign relations. Former Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh at the Pentagon, 8 June 2004. Yemen is a member of the United Nations, the Arab League, and Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and also participates in the non-aligned movement. Yemen has acceded to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Ousted Yemeni President Abdrabbuh Mansur Hadi with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, the 7th of May 2015. Since the end of the 1994 civil war, tangible progress has been made on the diplomatic front in restoring normal relations with Yemen's neighbors. In the summer of 2000, Yemen and Saudi Arabia signed an international border treaty settling a 50-year-old dispute over the location of the border between the two countries. 246. Yemen's northern border had been undefined. The Arabian Desert prevented any human habitation there. The Saudi-Yemen barrier was constructed by Saudi Arabia against an influx of illegal immigrants and against the smuggling of drugs and weapons. 247. The Independent headed an article with Saudi Arabia, one of the most vocal critics in the Arab world of Israel's security fence in the West Bank, is quietly emulating the Israeli example by erecting a barrier along its porous border with Yemen. 248. In March 2020, the Trump administration and key U.S. allies including Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates cut off tens of millions of dollars for health care programs and other aid to the United Nations appeal for Yemen. As a result of funding cuts, The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs stated that the UN agencies were forced to either close or reduce more than 75% of its programs that year alone, affecting more than 8 million people. Saudi Arabia had been leading a Western-backed military coalition, including the United Arab Emirates as a key member, which intervened in Yemen in 2015, in a bid to restore the government ousted from power by the Houthi movement. The United Nations described the situation in Yemen, where the war killed tens of thousands of people and left millions on the brink of famine, as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. 249. Protest against Saudi blockade of Yemen, New York City, 2017. In January 2024, President Joe Biden announced that the United States, Britain and allies Australia, Bahrain, Canada and the Netherlands had launched a military assault on Houthi militant targets in Yemen. 250. Military soldiers of the Yemeni Army in 2011. The armed forces of Yemen include the Yemen Army, includes Republican Guard, Navy, includes Marines, Yemeni Air Force, Al-Quwwat al-Jawiyya al-Yamaniya, includes Air Defense Force. A major reorganization of the armed forces continues. The unified air forces and air defenses are now under one command. The Navy has concentration in Aden. Total armed forces manning numbers about 401,000 active personnel, including moreover especially conscripts. The number of military personnel is relatively high. In sum, Yemen is the second largest military force on the Arabian Peninsula after Saudi Arabia. In 2012, total active troops were estimated as follows: Army, 390,000, Navy, 7,000, and Air Force, 5,000. In September 2007, the government announced the reinstatement of compulsory military service. Yemen's defense budget, which in 2006 represented approximately 40% of the total government budget, is expected to remain high for the near term, as the military draft takes effect and internal security threats continue to escalate. By 2012, Yemen had 401,000 active personnel. Human rights. Corruption in Yemen is such that it ranked 176 out of 180 countries in the 2022 Corruption Perceptions Index. 251. The government and its security forces have been responsible for torture, inhumane treatment and extrajudicial executions. There are arbitrary arrests of citizens, especially in the south, as well as arbitrary searches of homes. Prolonged pre-trial detention is a serious problem, and judicial corruption, inefficiency, and executive interference undermine due process. Freedom of speech, the press, and religion are all restricted. 252. Journalists critical of the government are often harassed and threatened by the police. 172. Homosexuality is illegal, punishable by death. 253. Yemen is ranked last of 135 countries in the 2012 Global Gender Gap Report. 254. Human Rights Watch reported on discrimination and violence against women, as well as on the abolition of the minimum marriage age of 15 for women. The onset of puberty, interpreted by some to be as low as the age of 9, was set as a requirement for marriage instead. 255. Publicity about the case of 10-year-old Yemeni divorcee Majoud Ali brought the child marriage issue to the forefront worldwide. 256, 257, 258. In 2017, the UN Human Rights Council voted to create a team of experts to investigate suspected breaches of humanitarian law and human rights in Yemen. 259. In December 2021, The Guardian revealed Saudi Arabia used incentives and threats as part of a pressure campaign to end a UN inquiry into human rights infringements in Yemen. 260. In June 2020, a human rights group revealed the scale of torture and deaths in Yemen's unofficial detention centers. UAE and Saudi forces were responsible for some of the most shocking treatment of prisoners, including being hung upside down for hours and sexual torture such as the burning of genitals. 261. According to 2020 United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, estimates 6.1 million girls and women were in need of gender-based violence services. The UNFPA also reported a rise in gender-based violence cases amid COVID-19 pandemic, increase in rate of child marriages, most acutely among internally displaced persons, IDPs. 1 in 5 girls aged 10 to 19 were married in IDP camps, compared to 1 in 8 in host communities. 262. The United States Department of State 2013 Trafficking in Persons report classified Yemen as a Tier 3 country. 263, meaning that its government does not fully comply with the minimum standards against human trafficking and is not making significant efforts to do so. 264, Yemen officially abolished slavery in 1962. 265, but it is still being practiced. 266, on the 22nd of June, 2020, Human Rights Watch wrote an open letter to the UN Secretary-General on Children and Armed Conflict report to improve the protection of children in Yemen and in Myanmar. 267, Amnesty said, United Nations Security Council must urgently fix its monitoring and reporting mechanism for children impacted by armed conflict. 268, on the 14th of September 2020 Human Rights Watch demanded an end to the interference caused by Houthi rebels and other authorities in Yemen aid operations, as millions of lives dependent on the aid operations were being put at risk. 269, Administrative Divisions. Map of the federal regions of Yemen. Yemen is divided into 20 governorates, Muhafazat, the latest being Rayma Governorate, which was created during 2004, plus one municipality called Amanat al-Asma, the latter containing the constitutional capital, Sana'a. 270, an additional governorate, Socotra Governorate, was created in December 2013 comprising Socotra Island, previously part of Hadramaut Governorate. 271. The governorates are subdivided into 333 districts, Mudarria, which are subdivided into 2,210 sub-districts, and then into 38,284 villages, as of 2001. In 2014, a constitutional panel decided to divide the country into 6 regions, 4 in the north, 2 in the south, and capital Sana'a outside of any region, creating a federalist model of governance. 272. This federal proposal was a contributing factor toward the Houthis' subsequent coup d'etat against the government. 273, 274, 275, Governorates of Yemen: Sada, Al-Jawf, Hadramaut, Al-Mara, Hajjah, Amran, Al-Mahwit, Amanat al-Asima, Sana'a City, Sana'a, Marib, Al-Hudadah, Rayma, Dama, Ib, Dale, Al-Baida, Shadwa, Taiz, Lahij, Abiyan, Aden, Socotra. Economy. Historical GDP per capita development. Yemen as of 2013 had a GDP, PPP, of $61 and 63 cents billion, with an income per capita of $2,500. Services are the largest economic sector, 61.4% of GDP, followed by the industrial sector, 30.9%, and agriculture, 7.7%. Of these, petroleum production represents around 25% of GDP and 63% of the government's revenue. 4. Agriculture. A coffee plantation in Yemen. Principal agricultural commodities produced include grain, vegetables, fruits, pulses, cat, coffee, cotton, dairy products, fish, livestock, sheep,